to be just pumping in more resources and creating more environmental damage to get even more output. That's a dangerous thing, obviously, and in New Zealand in particular. In fact, yesterday we had new productivity figures for the year to March showing that our labour productivity has actually, growth has slumped in the last couple of years relative to the last 20 or 30 years. And in New Zealand, that's been the story of the economy, particularly in the last couple of years. We've just pumped in more resources, so more people, more water, more nitrate, and we've increased the GDP, but we haven't actually increased GDP per capita much.
So is the kind of good growth you're talking about, or limited incremental growth, perfectly possible without greed? I mean, is the trouble that the human race is just not wired for sensible growth? We grab growth because we see profit in grabbing growth.
People are ambitious and greedy. That's what makes the world go round, isn't it? And also we're quite good at coming up with new ideas. So Uber, here's an idea again. Uber, a piece of software, could mean we need a lot fewer cars on the road. Because instead of having all these cars parked, which we have to own, what if a Uber or a ride sharing allowed us to essentially share those cars and have shared ownership, which meant we'd need fewer of these cars produced. Now that's an idea a lot of people have talked about, using apps to better use resources. Hotels, for example. Airbnb has effectively increased Auckland's number of hotel rooms by 1,000 hotel rooms in the last year. So Auckland managed to magic up out of nowhere 1,000 hotel rooms without building a single hotel building. And that's where, you get your growth without using more of the resources.
So Airbnb and Uber will fundamentally rewire the psyche of the human race and make us all share.
And could help us use less resources and get the same output. Which is a problem if you're one of those workers. Your resource is not being used or paid for anymore.
Speaking of resources, this is a complicated and very long-running issue. I'll just try and ask you a simple question about it. Residents living at the edge of a large Auckland park are very sad and puzzled about why their homes are being demolished to build a car park. They've got 90 days' notice. It's because Auckland wants to make Monte Cecilia Park in Mount Roskill, which is actually a place many Aucklanders have never been to.
It's beautiful, actually.
Yeah, it's a grand place, and they want to make it grander. It's got lovely big trees. It's got a very nice cafe in the old Pa homestead. It's a very big park already. Anyway, the council wants these people out. It's offered them, these residents, a reference. They seem to be saying that's no use. They have to enter a rabid accommodation market. Even if the park's being expanded, people wonder why it has to have a car park, because the Mormons across the road have a big car park, but they haven't been approached about the use of it. Here's the question. Does it seem strange to you that as Auckland densifies and tries to find space for housing, that a decades-old project to enlarge a park at an all-up cost, some people say will maybe approach $100 million, just carries on so the city can have a grander space? Do you think we would be rethinking our use of space, especially with Phil Goff talking about golf courses and all that stuff?
Yeah, it's about priorities. Auckland has a massive housing crisis caused partly by council and government's decision to get out of the business of providing social housing. And the idea that a council effort costing $100 million is going to remove some of that social housing to create more green space.
Well, it wouldn't be that bad if it was green space, because cities need parks, but it's a car park. So that's the real nail in the coffin, I think.
It's a painful thing, and I suspect if the decisions were made now instead of 5 or 10 years ago, they might be different.
I would like one thing, says Tim of Nio, to come from this expensive flag debate, for us to become the first country in the world where anyone may fly any flag they like on any occasion, and if more than one, so be it. Do you agree with that?
I like it.
Hey.
I like his talk.
I'm about to put my red peak up the flagpole.
Bernard Hickey, Nikki Pellegrino, lovely to have you both on the panel.
Cheers.
Thank you, everybody. Good luck if you're travelling. It's hard going outside the cities, as we said, but good luck getting there and stay safe. Have a lovely Easter. We're back on Easter Tuesday. Checkpoint with John Campbell is on the way.
Kia ora everyone, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm John Campbell, and on behalf of the Checkpoint team, thank you for joining us. Tonight, how the river changed its path and the locals who realised what was about to happen and got 186 people evacuated before the waters came smashing through. Ko Hapu, the former New Zealand soldier held without charge in Perth since November, is back in New Zealand. He tells us about life under Australia's tough new immigration laws. Today's the day we'll learn whether it's Lockwood, Silver Fern or the country's existing flag. We've polled MPs on what they voted for. And speaking of MPs, Chester Burrows, did he run over a TPP protester's foot? A netball star retires and the White Ferns and Black Caps prepare for a very big weekend. And traffic leaving our major cities as we enter Easter weekend. In short, it's rubbish. All of that and more coming up. But first, here's Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Kia ora, good evening. A man who was shot twice by police in Whanganui today had earlier held a woman at gunpoint while trying to escape. Acting District Commander Inspector Tania Kura says police dogs and the Armed Defenders Squad were called into the suburb of Aromaho to find the man who was wanted by police.
As the offender moved through a number of properties, we understand that he threatened a female resident at one of those properties with a gun, and a number of cordons were established in the area. Extremely serious. A member of the public was involved and completely traumatic event for her as well.
Inspector Tania Kura says the man was shot in the head and the leg and was in a stable condition in hospital. The police investigation will continue over the weekend and the Independent Police Conduct Authority is also investigating. Workers continuing to plug a gap in the Waiho River's stop banks after it burst its banks last night and began running through a hotel. The Franz Josef Hotel on the west coast has been evacuated and a state of emergency declared. Crews are using diggers to shift large rocks in an attempt to reroute the river away from the hotel. They have a massive job ahead of them as the river is running high and fast. However, the severe weather and torrential downpours have now eased and the Waiho is no longer posing a threat to other accommodation providers in the area. The river has deposited large amounts of debris and silt around the hotel. Guests who were evacuated last night have been allowed back in to collect their belongings today. Turkey says it tried to warn Belgium that one of two brothers who blew themselves up in suicide attacks in Brussels was a foreign fighter sent back to Europe after being arrested on the Syrian border. Belgium's federal prosecutor has confirmed the El Bakraoui brothers were behind suicide attacks at Brussels airport and on a metro station that killed more than 30 people. The Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan says Belgium was informed of the deportation of Ibrahim al-Bakraoui.
One of
the Brussels attackers was caught in Gaziantep in June 2015 and was deported. We informed the Belgian embassy with a diplomatic note about the deportation on July the 14th, 2015. The Belgian authorities released the attacker.
The translated words of Tayyip Erdogan, the Turkish president. New Zealanders will know shortly if they have a new flag. Voting for the second flag referendum will close in 2 hours with preliminary results expected by 8:30. Voters had to choose between the current flag and the blue and black flag with a silver fern designed by Kyle Lockwood. It's expected more than 2 million people would have voted. The Prime Minister, John Campbell, is hopeful they've voted for change, but says regardless, the referendum has been successful in getting people to talk about how New Zealanders represent themselves. The Australian government says debris recovered from the African nation of Mozambique is highly likely to have come from the missing Malaysia Airlines flight MH370. The flight disappeared with 239 passengers and crew on board shortly after taking off from Kuala Lumpur 2 years ago. Wreckage was discovered along the southern coast of Africa earlier this week, and the Australian Transport Minister Darren Chester says the Malaysian investigation team has finished its examination of the two pieces of debris. Mr Chester says they are consistent with panels from a Malaysia Airlines Boeing 777 aircraft. The high-profile businessman Sir Ralph Norris says Facebook has a duty to make sure people setting up profiles on it are real. A woman in Australia lost about $200,000 because of a fake Facebook account that was set up using Sir Ralph's identity. In the past 10 days, he's been told of other profiles using his name that authorities have since shut down. Sir Ralph says a lot of identification is needed to set up a bank account, but not a Facebook account.
I somehow wonder whether or not Facebook have got some sort of responsibility here to make sure that the sites that are being put up there are genuine.
Sir Ralph says people need to be very sure that people they're dealing with online are real. In sport, the Central Pulse netball coach Tanya Derns hasn't ruled out approaching former international Irene van Dijk to fill the gap in her roster left by Jodie Brown. Brown, the former Silver Fern shooter, has announced her retirement after rupturing knee ligaments at a pre-season tournament in Sydney last weekend. The new Trans-Tasman competition starts next week, and Derns is going through a list of non-contracted players to look for a replacement. The 43-year-old Van Dijk had an indifferent season at the Pulse last year. Derns says picking up Van Dijk has its issues.
Oh, look, she'd be at top of anybody's list, wouldn't she? But, Irene's now in full-time employment for our netball zone, so there'd be issues there that would be taking her away from her full-time employment, and that's a conversation that we haven't had yet.
Tanya Derns, the Pulse hope to have someone signed by the end of the week. WRC driver Hayden Paddon is to compete in 2 rounds of the New Zealand Rally Championships this year. Paddon will drive a New Zealand-developed Hyundai i20 rally car in next month's Rally Otago and the Rally of Whangarei. 2011 World Cup hero Stephen Donald is set to play his first Super Rugby game for the Chiefs in 5 years after being named on the bench for their game against the Western Force in Hamilton on Saturday night. And the Wellington Phoenix have signed the Melbourne Victory playmaker Guy Finkler on a 2-year contract. That's the news.
Planes.
Looking forward to the Messerschmitt, the Germans' top fighter aircraft, and the mighty Spitfire do battle again here in the skies over Wanaka.
Easter eggs.
It's really fun!
And celebrations for Tūhoe.
We're putting away our anger. With Tūhoe's settlement, we're looking for a more positive future.
Wherever it's happening, Susie Ferguson and Guy Aspinall, morning reports, weekdays from 6. Then after 9, news as it happens. In-depth conversations with world-leading experts and the latest trends you need to know about. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather now to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Wellington, including the Central High Country and Coromandel Peninsula. Remaining areas of rain with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms, easing to isolated showers from the west this afternoon and evening. Bay of Plenty, rain with heavy falls and thunderstorms easing tomorrow morning. Gisborne to Wairanapa, periods of rain or showers with some heavy falls. Marlborough and Nelson, fine apart from a few showers this evening and overnight. Buller and Westland, cloudy periods and isolated showers. Fiordland becoming fine by evening. Canterbury to Southland, scattered showers, some possibly heavy with hail in Canterbury during the afternoon, clearing from Southland and Otago by evening and from Canterbury overnight. The Chatham Islands, rain developing overnight, possibly heavy tomorrow. It's 5:08.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Coming up on Checkpoint, he was held without any charge for over 4 months in an Australian maximum security prison. Now Ko Hapu is back in New Zealand and he tells us about the experience shortly. But we begin in the west coast township of Franz Joseph, where torrential rain last night caused the Waiho River to breach its banks, effectively redirecting itself through a hotel and then a holiday park. 186 people were rapidly evacuated, including guests at the Scenic Circle Hotel, which still finds itself in the middle of a makeshift river. Alan Wilson is Westland's District Civil Defence Controller. He told me that as the river rose, 2 locals keeping an eye on it realised what was about to happen and prevented what could have been a disaster.
That was, again, down to a couple of locals here. That they, Wayne and Tim, they were keeping an eye on it. One works for Doc, another works for as a volunteer firefighter, and they were keeping an eye on it, and they saw that the bank was starting to crumble, and they put things in motion and got people moving out fairly quickly.
What would have happened if they hadn't done that, if you didn't have that local knowledge and a really good early warning?
And that's not worth considering. It really isn't. That could have been disastrous. You had, 70 people in there. Aside come through when they were still in there. That just doesn't. It's just not worth thinking about.
So those two people, those two locals who said, hey, this is serious and we need to act fast, really did help avert what could have been a true disaster.
Yeah, and they did it again, just before the stop bank completely collapsed. They realised that the water was heading towards the motor camp. So again, they evacuated everybody from the motor camp. And of course, there's a lot of tourists in there. And then some of them said, can we near passports and stuff? And they said, right, you got 2 minutes, but it's really urgent. You've got to here, but you can go back and grab your essentials. And so they did that. And everybody, because one of the problems, as you know, when you're travelling, if you lose your passport, it leads to all sorts of complications. So they didn't want to do that, and the guys organised that.
So without that sense of urgency, do you think there was the potential for lives to have been lost?
I think that's a fair assessment. Yes.
Wow. So these people made a hell of a difference.
They did. Excellent couple of guys.
And one of those excellent guys was Wayne Costello from Dock. He stood on the riverbank last night, as you heard, saw the river was rising, knew what it was going to do, turn away and go down a new path, and he realised people needed to be evacuated fast. He told me it took about 45 minutes to get the guests out.
We had people safe at 10:15, and the bank first breached at 11:35, and within 20 minutes of it first breaching, or half an hour of it first breaching, it then just became a major torrent, and then the whole river went through there. It was amazing how quickly it cut through and pushed up against the hotel, then started cleaning out any garages of their contents and pushing over big diesel tanks, shifting cars and all the rest of that. But it was all reasonably well contained in a reasonably confined area, if you like. So that was good at that stage, because we had people away, and it was just really unfortunate for that old historic hotel.
Wayne, without local knowledge and quick action, without you guys having that discussion, that meeting on the side of the river and thinking, yep, we've got to act and we've got to act fast, what do you think would have happened? Well, I guess there's the potential for an absolute disaster, but we do have that local knowledge and we have got good plans in place, and so we didn't, and that's the reason why we have them, I guess. Yeah, you must be proud of everyone. Oh, look, the fire brigade last night were just absolutely tremendous. The ladies that came in at a drop of a hat to man staff the welfare centre and ring around and get other people to come in and help, and all those people that came in and dropped off food. It was just a fantastic community spirit that sort of really pulls together and helps everyone out in that sort of circumstance. I mean, Alex and Richard got away from their homes sort of in what they were standing in, and the kids in just what they were probably went to bed in, and they've had all sorts of things dropped off to them for their family. So that's just, it's tremendous. It's quite a wonderful feeling when you've got a community that rallies around in that sort of situation. Yeah. Alan Wilson suggests to me that this is an absolutely textbook evacuation, that it simply couldn't have gone better. Yeah, well, that part was pretty good, but we still had other properties further along that we'd notified at that early stage, look, there could be a problem, so be on your guard. And so they went around and got all their guests up and let them know that, look, there could be a problem here, you just need to be ready to go if things happen. And it wasn't for another couple of hours, but then the water started pushing in further down the road, and that's when we had to evacuate the top 10 and Westwood Lodge, and that was quite a few more people. I think the top 10 was full, so it's around 100 people there. And then there was 16 guests at the Westwood Lodge. And again, we got them out in time. And again, it was thanks to the really, really good work of the local fire brigade. Wayne, did the entire river just simply change course? Did it become a new river effectively? Yeah, once it went through the bank, it pretty much the whole water course was going through there for a while. It's now sort of been diverted, so there's half and half staying in the original sort of course, I suppose, or riverbed, and half flowing down the outside of the stop bank, or what was the stop bank. Wayne Costello, who was one of the people who stood on the bank and thought, wow, this is going to go. It got people out of the holiday camp and the hotel. As you heard him say, the river's now kind of split into two. Half of it's gone back to where it used to go, but half of it is still running through where the hotel is, basically. And our reporter, Conan Young, is there. Conan, where are you? You at the hotel?
Well, look, I was actually just a few minutes ago, John, but right now I'm right next to the Waiho River and it's an absolute torrent. I know it's actually dropped from where it was when that hotel was evacuated last night, but it is still absolutely rushing off those mountains and down this river. I can see, what your previous guest was talking about in terms of the river having been diverted, but there's still a lot of water running through that hotel. I was there just earlier. Incredible things, really, that the river is literally running through the middle, through the grounds of that hotel. It's carried with it a whole lot of debris, a lot of tin off roofs, it looks like, some wood and stones, and a lot of silt. I was standing in really quite thick silt. And so, not really flooding as such, but more, has been described, the river just, having moved and actually is now running through the middle of that hotel. So incredible scenes. A couple of cars were still submerged in water there. They haven't been removed. I talked to some guests from the hotel who had been, along with others, allowed back this afternoon to retrieve their belongings. They said, look, their belongings were actually fine. There was no water damage or anything to them there. So I'm not sure how far into the hotel that the river has actually moved, if it's actually got inside, but it's certainly going to take a long time before they can get back in there. And I don't even know if they will be able to start running that hotel again. Just a huge clean-up ahead of them.
Conan, extraordinary. Two quick questions. Well, the first one's quick and the second one you can take as long as you like. So normally when something like a hotel floods, the grounds flood, the water is quite stationary. It's like a little lake or whatever. This water is still moving, so it is still very much part of the flowing river. And is the rest of the town affected? And if people are going to Franz Josef for a lovely Easter weekend, for example, are other things open as normal?
Look, this is actually the only hotel that is still affected at the moment. Look, the top 10 holiday camp, which is just down the road, they're actually still open to camper vans. But they're not. You wouldn't want to pitch a tent in this weather, and I'm not sure about their cabins. They were caught up in this earlier, but they're still taking camper vans, and everywhere is booked out now. Obviously, the spillover from this hotel having to be evacuated, everywhere is booked up. But I guess with a lot of tourists, I suppose a few of them might just think, well, look, we'll just move on from here. A bit of disruption for them, but look, for the hotel owners, just a huge nightmare for them.
Conan Young speaking live from Franz Josef. Thank you, Conan. It's coming up to 18 minutes past 5. The former New Zealand soldier who'd been held without charge in a maximum security prison in Perth since early November has arrived back in New Zealand. Ko Hapu was detained after his visa was revoked under tough new Australian immigration laws. Although Mr Hapu had no criminal history and had not been charged with anything, his membership of the Rebels Motorcycle Club saw his Australian visa revoked on character grounds. Mr Hapu rose to the rank of Lance Corporal in the New Zealand Army. He served in Afghanistan, where he was involved in the gun battle in which fellow soldier Lieutenant Timothy O'Donnell was killed, and was part of a security detail for Prime Minister John Key when he was there. Mr Hapu had been fighting deportation, but after 4.5 months in Casuarina prison, and with the possibility of indefinite detention, he agreed to return to New Zealand. He says he was provoked by prison staff, assaulted on one occasion, and held in solitary confinement before being put in a cell block, not with other detainees, but with serious criminals.
He as detainees were mixed in with the worst of the worst there. Casuarina is not a playground. You got the worst rape, you got the worst serial rapists there, you got the worst serial pedophiles there, you got the worst murderers there. It's the worst of the worst, yet we're all amongst it. But we were the ones that were getting punished for anything that happened.
And did you see that as almost a deliberate attempt to provoke you into some kind of lashing out, which would then have led to a criminal charge?
Yeah, yep. They would just keep pushing and pushing and trying to get us to break. So when I started refusing to be part of the system as a prisoner, my wrists were locked and my head was smashed into the glass windows.
Your head was smashed into the glass windows?
Yeah.
Who by?
guards there.
So I want to clarify this, Cor. Your head was smashed into a glass window. What room were you in? Where were you at this time?
This was just outside the visiting rooms, but they made sure to lock my door and push everyone out of those rooms before they let me out, so there was no witnesses there.
But it did happen?
Yeah, I still got the scars on the side of my face.
Were you charged with anything?
No charges, no pending charges, and no criminal record to place me in a maximum prison or any jail.
And were you charged with anything at any stage by the Western Australian Police or the Australian National Police Force?
No charges.
So you were held in a maximum security prison for what, 4 months?
5 months.
Without any charge. You say you were physically assaulted and you were kept in solitary confinement.
Yep.
And what do you make of that?
I just think it's disgusting how they can take your rights away as being a human and making up their own laws as they go.
So what's happening now, Cor? You're back in New Zealand. Are you going to fight Peter Dutton, Australian immigration and the Australian system, or are you going to settle down here again?
I want to fight it, but I want to fight him. Just him. I don't need to stand behind anyone else, and to me his power is just on a piece of paper.
He, early on, when he was asked why you were being held without charge, suggested that he had information on you, suggested that he had some kind of dossier which contained material that exposed you as the kind of person who shouldn't be in Australia. Did you or your lawyer ever see that material? Were you ever told what that material was? Do you know what that material was?
The so-called secret file he's talking about is a mandatory file that's been given by the police, and that's on every person that's in the club. There's no secret. It just says that we're in the club. Yeah, that's the one thing that I was not denying, that I was in the club. So if this was so secret and there was things in there that he says that they have enough information on me, well, charge me with it then. I'd been there for 5 months. So where's the secret file? To me, it's just a whole lot of crap.
What would you say to Peter Dutton if you could actually say something to him?
Is it the colour of my skin that you're afraid of? Or is it the people we are, proud people, that come to your country to do better? Is that what you're afraid of? Give me the answers that I've been asking for the whole time. Show me where it says that we were being held as prisoners and under what crimes. What judge did we stand before? What day we were in court? What jury? What prosecutor? Everything to do with a courtroom. Show me in a legal documentation where it says we were a prisoner or where we were a detainee, because our paperwork clearly stated we're there underneath failing the character test under the Migration Act, nothing under criminal law. So I just want...
Ko Hapu, we seem to have dropped out early there, but he is back in New Zealand, having chosen not to remain in indefinite detention in Western Australia and attempt to fight to get his visa returned to him from back in New Zealand. 4.5 months, no charge, no criminal history, held in a maximum security prison. Just coming up to 24 minutes past 5. Coming up next, in a few hours, we will know whether the country has a new flag. The Prime Minister says he won't be disappointed if the flag isn't changed because the process has got people talking. Well, we've been talking, we've polled MPs to see how they voted, and later in the programme, Australia's Transport Minister says he's confident a piece of aircraft found on the coast of Mozambique last month almost certainly came from the missing plane MH370. We speak to the man who found it. We'd love to hear from you. Feedback, you can text 2101 or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. We're also on Twitter and Facebook, of course. If you are in a car and you're able to use a phone, in other words, you're not driving and you're stuck in egregiously bad traffic as you leave one of our major cities, do text us to tell us about it. Tell us where you are and tell us if it is really a lot worse than usual. Our text number is 2101. Obviously, you'd be doing that if you were a passenger, not a driver. Right, it's D-Day for the flag. The Prime Minister, John Campbell, says he's confident we'll know later tonight if New Zealand's want a new flag. Well, it's absolutely going to happen. We will know later tonight. The second referendum, where voters must choose between the current flag and the alternative blue and black Carl Lockwood design with the silver fern, closes at 7 o'clock tonight with preliminary results due around 8:30. John Campbell says he won't be disappointed if the flag isn't changed because the process has got people talking.
We're the only country in the world that's ever asked their citizens whether they want to change the flag. Every other country's just got up and said, here's your new flag. That includes Canada. That's what Frank Bainimarama's doing in Fiji. That's always been the process. And notoriously, it's difficult to win referendums. So, Winston Peters in today's dollars spent exactly the same as what we're spending on the current referendum on compulsory super, and he lost 92% to 8. We've had 2 referendums on extending the term of our parliament, both of them lost. So they're difficult to win, but I just think this is one of those ones we just don't know. Let's wait and see.
If you had your days over again, would you have done what you've done?
Yeah, I would. Because, in the end, actually it's my job as Prime Minister, I think, to lead the debate in a variety of different areas. And I think it's important that we as a country just think a little bit about how we see ourselves being represented on the world stage. And actually, I think there's been at least awakening to the principle, an awakening to the principle that we actually don't use our current flag in the way that other countries use their flag. And as a result of all this, if the flag stays the same and we as New Zealanders fly it more, use it more, use it as the way to demonstrate we're proud Kiwis, then that's been success.
The Prime Minister, who incidentally, if you're listening rather than watching, was wearing the Carl Lockwood silver fin flag on his lapel as he was talking today. It may be the last day he does that, unless I guess he wants to continue afterwards. The Prime Minister was asked if more people now support a change of flag, but just not that alternative design he wears on his lapel. He says the fact more than 2 million people have voted in the referendum is a good sign for change.
I just feel happy that we're having that debate. I feel happy that there's a lot more flags flying, and I feel happy about the fact that people have at least given the process some thought and they've engaged. I mean, if nobody had come out and voted, then you'd say it's been a failure. But over 2 million people are voting, and that's an awful lot of people to get out in a postal referendum. Put it this way, more people are filling out and have filled out their referendum forms as a percentage of the population than will probably go to the polls and vote for the next President of the United States of America. That tells you that we've been successful at least at one form.
The Prime Minister, who leaves New Zealand tonight for a holiday ahead of the Nuclear Security Summit, which is in Washington next week. And in fact, he did say he would stop wearing his alternative Lockwood flag pin if the referendum result went in favour of retaining the current flag. RNZ, through all sorts of means, will be able to tell you the result later this evening, including on social media, of course, and on news bulletins throughout the night. We conducted our own survey of the 121 MPs in Parliament to find out what flag they voted for. Of the 121 MPs, 117 of them responded. 57 have voted for change. That's the Lockwood silver fern flag, 57 of the 117. 54 want to keep the current flag. So basically that's an even split. The remaining 6 who responded declined to tell us which way they're voting or said they decided not to vote at all. So 57-54 in favour of change. All New Zealand First MPs have voted to keep the current flag. The majority of national MPs are voting for change except Judith Collins, Paul Foster-Bell, Brett Hudson, Simon O'Connor and Jamie Lee Ross, who voted to keep the current flag. Across the Labour Party, only former leader David Shearer publicly supports the Lockwood flag, and the Green Party votes are split with Catherine Delahunty not voting at all. Full results, in case you're interested in what your MP opted, are on the RNZ website. It's 28 minutes past 5. Police in Whanganui have revealed they shot a man twice, including once in the head when he pointed a gun at them this morning. He'd earlier tried to flee from officers on foot, running through properties in a local suburb. The acting Central District Commander, Tanya Kura, says it all started shortly after 8 o'clock when officers went to a house to speak with a 49-year-old.
At about the same time, police received a report of an individual at a nearby address. A police dog handler started tracking from this address, which took staff through several nearby properties as the offender attempted to evade the police.
Well, one of those properties belongs to Bob, who says he was lucky he wasn't in the house when the man came through.
All they said to me was there was some guy climbing over fences. Once I see a cop over here, of course, I'm across the road, I live here. And that's when he told me there's some guy climbing through the window. Well, you know, I know the house, so obviously I'm going to go in.
The man is in a stable condition in hospital and is yet to be charged. Our reporter Max Toll joins us now from where it all happened. Hi Max, welcome. What else are the police saying?
Yeah, look, it's been very quiet out here. I'm standing by the police cordon. It's been quiet here for a few hours, although I think it'd be fair to say that at about 9 o'clock in the morning, all hell broke loose. The police did reveal just this afternoon that a woman, a member of the public, was threatened with a gun during that foot chase. She's obviously very traumatised, but she is okay, the police say. The officers involved who shot the man did give him first aid. He was taken to hospital and, as you say, is in a stable condition. She says that she's happy with their actions. She says they acted professionally and they did things by the book. I did ask if it was protocol to shoot a man in the head if he presents a gun at the police. Tanya Kura didn't really have a clear answer, but said that in armed situations, look, everything's dynamic. Also, she did say that a second person has been arrested in connection with the incident, although she won't say exactly what that connection is just yet. Also, the IPCA, the Independent Police Conduct Authority, will investigate, but they do whenever a police officer fires a gun. And the police, of course, will do their own investigation over the weekend.
Max, we heard from Bob. You've spoken to a few neighbours there, right?
Yeah, look, when I arrived just before lunchtime, there was an elderly man called Trevor who was just sitting on his porch. I asked how long he'd been sat there. He said he'd actually been there since early morning and he was there when everything happened. He said that there were officers running around with rifles, there were loud sirens, there were ambulances, obviously after the shooting. He described the shooting as 3 quick bangs in quick succession, bang, bang, bang. Although I should clarify that the police have insisted that there were only 2 shots fired, both from the officers. Trevor says that Keith Street, which connects to the cordon, has a reputation for having some quite, in his words, rough clientele. I also spoke with another Englishman from Yorkshire called Bob, who I think you've just heard from.
Yep.
Bob told me he was across the road when it happened, and the man actually ran through his house through an open window and out through the back door. He said he was very disconcerted, and had he been in the house, he wouldn't like to imagine what might have happened.
Max Toll from the scene of Whanganui. Thank you so much for joining us. Max, coming up on Checkpoint, the identities of three of the 4 men who carried out Tuesday's suicide attacks in Brussels have been confirmed by Belgian officials. National MP Chester Borrows is being investigated for allegedly driving into a TPP protester's leg or over their foot. A campaign group, Change the New Zealand Flag, is hosting a party tonight ahead of the release of preliminary referendum results. And we're there, we cross there live. But first, before all of that, here's Katrina Batten with the 5:30, slightly late, RNZ headlines.
A man who was shot twice by the police in Whanganui today had earlier held a woman resident at gunpoint while trying to escape. The acting district commander, Tanya Kura, says police dogs and the armed defenders squad were called into the suburb of Aramoho to find the man who was wanted by police. Inspector Kura says it's extremely serious that a member of the public was involved. She says the man was shot in the head and the leg and is in a stable condition in hospital. A former New Zealand soldier held without charge in a maximum security prison in Perth under Australia's tough immigration laws says he was assaulted by guards. Ko Hapu told Checkpoint he was also subjected to solitary confinement and, when released from solitary, put in cell blocks with murderers, rapists and paedophiles. Mr Hapu was detained after his visa was revoked because he had joined a motorcycle gang. He's arrived back in New Zealand after agreeing voluntarily to return. Work is continuing to plug a gap in the West Coast's river's stop banks after it burst its banks last night and began running through a hotel at Franz Josef. Diggers are trying to reroute the Waiho River away from the Muller Scenic Hotel with the help of large rocks. Hotel guests evacuated last night have been allowed back in today to collect their belongings. Turkey says it tried to warn Belgium that one of 2 brothers who blew themselves up in suicide attacks in Brussels was a foreign fighter sent back to Europe after being arrested on the Syrian border. The Turkish president says Belgium was informed of the deportation of Ibrahim al-Bakrawi. The Australian government says debris recovered from the African nation of Mozambique is highly likely to have come from the missing Malaysia Airlines flight MH370. I'll be back at 6 o'clock with more news, weather and sport.
We thoroughly look forward to it, Katrina. Thank you very much indeed. We've got lots of sport coming up tonight, including a Silver Ferns stalwart 61 Test. She is standing down because of injury. And the White Ferns and the Black Caps both playing at the T20 final, World Cup final this weekend. And so we preview those games. But let's turn to business now. And complaints that the Overseas Investment Office, which must give the OK to foreign investors taking significant stakes in local companies, is taking too much time and holding up business. Business editor Giles Beckford joins us live from Wellington, where, Giles, you have been pondering this.
Indeed I have. It's prompted, John, by one company in particular that I was talking to last night. It's a small Dunedin company called Scott Technology, and they are involved in automation and robot technology. They make, for instance, the systems that drive conveyor belts. They make the systems that run meat chains in the abattoir. So it's a highly skilled technology work that they're doing. They have been waiting for a new overseas investor to take a majority stake, a firm called JBS Meat from Brazil. And they were going to they are taking a 50% stake in the company, or just over 50%. It's not big money, it's a few tens of millions of dollars, but the money that's being pumped into Scott Technology is the money that's going to be used for the next phase of their development. So it will be for product design, for market expansion and the like. Now, they lodged that application in September last year. In the scheme of things, it's pretty small beer, really. I mean, it's not a major, mega takeover of a company. But they've actually had to put things on hold because they're still waiting for the Overseas Investment Office to actually go through all the palaver of approval. Now, the shareholders of Scott Technology have already said the deal is fine by us, we go along with it. And it raises the question, why is it taking so long? And Scott Technology says it's really quite unacceptable that they should be waiting 6 months or more for the approval of this deal. And now another case has actually come to light this morning or today in the National Business Review, and they talk about the apple grower and exporter Scales Corporation, who have struck not exactly the same sort of thing, but they're finding that the OIO is now going through a rather detailed look at their shareholding because a Chinese investor wants to take 20%. The rules are that if you have more than 25% of your shareholding owned by foreign investors, then it must be approved by the OIO. So once again, they're scrutinising it, and it's meant that this deal with Scales and the Chinese investor has been delayed into next month, and there'll be some cost to that. Now, leave aside the merits of direct foreign investment, whether you agree or disagree. If you have a process for it, it should be quick, it should be efficient, and it should work. It shouldn't actually get in the way of business, which is apparently what, at the moment, the OIO seems to be. And it seems to be starved of resources, and that's why we have these delays.
Yeah, there's been some talk about them being starved of resources for quite some time now, but clearly it's starting to have an impact. Giles, what happened on the markets today?
I think the markets went home on holiday rather early today, John. It dribbled down the top 50 index, 6 points at 662. Kiwi dollar nice and steady, 67 euro cents and 89.3 Australian.
Giles Beckford, have a fantastic Easter weekend. Our business editor,
thank you, John.
Giles Beckford, thank you. Whanganui MP Chester Burrows, a man who's been doing lots of lobbying on behalf of Fonterra suppliers over the past few weeks, may be in hot water after he allegedly drove over the foot of a TPP protester. The police are investigating the incident, which occurred as Mr Burrows and the Minister Paula Bennett left a breakfast meeting at a Whanganui hotel on Tuesday. It was captured on video. Here's our political reporter, Demelza Leslie.
The MP and former police officer says several protesters had been yelling abuse at him and Paula Bennett at the morning meeting. He says as the National MPs tried to leave, the group blocked his vehicle.
As we drove out of the car park, they moved to stand in front of the car on the driveway. So the police removed them from the front of the car, and when they'd been moved, I drove off. I was unaware that anyone had been,
anyone had been hurt.
The police say one protester received a leg injury after allegedly coming into contact with Mr Burrow's vehicle. A video of the incident shows Mr Burrow's car moving slowly forward, but it does not appear to completely stop. Two police officers approach and the protesters move apart. As the car pulls away, one woman can be seen holding her foot off the ground. Chester Burrows says he spoke to the police after he saw the video on Facebook.
They told me that there had been a complaint and that the woman had had an x-ray. She didn't have any broken bones, so I'm quite pleased that she wasn't hurt, obviously. Everyone's got a right to protest, and that's the country we live in. So I'm waiting to hear from the police. There will be an investigation, and I'll be happy to talk to them when they have time.
Paula Bennett says they were inching forward in the vehicle while the protesters got out of the way.
Look, from my perspective, they tried to block the way. She slowed right down, was inching forward. Police moved the protesters out of the way. We thought we were through and kept moving.
Ms Bennett also wasn't aware someone had been hurt.
And it wasn't until later in the day that I saw something on Twitter, actually. And then Chester managed to get hold of the police a bit later on, and they said that there might have been minor injuries to a protester there.
The Prime Minister, John Campbell, says he's aware of the complaint against Mr Burrows.
I think they were going incredibly slowly and they're just trying to move out. Whether someone got in the way of the car, I don't really know. I haven't seen the video. But what I know about Chester is he's a very gentle person. He's not the sort of person that goes seeking controversy, or no, he's certainly not a person known for doing angry things. And if anything has happened, then it'll be an accident, in my view.
The police say they're gathering more information about the incident to assess what, if any, steps are taken. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Demelza Leslie.
Lots of people texting in. Obviously, the people in the cars with them are texting in, and Auckland seems to be particularly bad tonight, even by Auckland standards. 2 hours to get from Auckland to Papakura. One text says normally a 45-minute run, and frustrating, they describe it as, which is very polite language, and we're extremely impressed. However, up the Kapiti coast, someone had a dream run home, although they did leave Wellington at 3:45, but they got home in... What? No, I think you're being facetious. Only 1 hour and 45 in the car, quickest for weeks. I didn't realise the run up the Kapiti coast was that bad. I'm sorry, I missed the fact you were being sarcastic. And Mount Albert Road outside Unitec in Auckland again, absolute snail pace, trying to get to West Auckland, yet to chance the Northwestern Motorway. Beam me up, Scotty. Informing, not complaining, not usually caught in this, thankfully, said Ian. So it sounds like everyone's actually having a miserable time getting out of Auckland and Wellington. We'll go to Carla Penman, our reporter, who's watching all of this in a short while. But first, the identities of 3 of the 4 men who carried out Tuesday's suicide attacks in Brussels have now been confirmed by Belgian officials. The Belgian citizens include brothers Khalid and Ibrahim al-Barkawi and the bomb maker Najim Lakraoui. Authorities are continuing to search for another suspect who they believe escaped alive. In Brussels, people have continued to gather in the city to pay tribute to the victims and say they won't live in fear because of terrorism. The ABC's Sarah Segdi reports.
In Brussels, people continue to come together to remember the more than 30 people killed in Tuesday's attacks. Some of the victims have now been identified, including 20-year-old law student Leopold Hecht, who was hurt in the blast at the Malbec subway station and later died from his injuries. His peers held a memorial for him.
I learnt this morning that he passed away. Apparently he was in a coma yesterday. I thought it was very shocking and very sad that such a thing can happen to an acquaintance. I did not know him personally, but for his friends, I think it is very sad to lose someone here in Saint Louis.
Near the Brussels Stock Exchange building, hundreds of people laid flowers and lit candles in honour of the victims. They say they won't let the cruelty of the self-described Islamic State change the way they live.
No fear. Anger, but no fear. I'm sad for the world the way it is right now. And it's only a beginning. There was France, there's Turkey, it's all over the world. And now Brussels, and it's never ending. And that scares me but not ISIS themselves.
I came here because I'm really shocked by what's happening. I came here with a friend and her 2 children to say that we are together with Belgium. We cannot let terrorists continue doing what they're doing because it's really sad. Innocent people die and that makes us sick. I don't know what we can do to stop them, but I ask everyone to remain together, united, and that we denounce them wherever they are. We have to denounce them so they stop doing this.
More information about the assailants has emerged. Khalid al-Bakrawi has been identified as the suicide bomber who attacked the subway station. His older brother Ibrahim al-Bakrawi was one of the suicide bombers at Zaventem airport. The other suicide bomber is Najim Latrawi, who's also been linked to the Paris attacks. Police continue to search for another man seen at the airport who escaped alive. The al-Bakrawi brothers were known to police but not for anything terror-related. But Turkey's president says his government detained Ibrahim al-Bakrawi near the Syrian border last June and informed the Belgian government he was a terrorist fighter. Police have made gains in their investigation. They found bomb-making materials in one home and a computer in a rubbish bin which contained a note written by Ibrahim al-Bakrawi. Belgian federal prosecutor Frederick Leyu has spoken about the discovery.
In a bin on the same road, investigators found a computer containing Abraham al-Bakrawi's will, in which he says, and I quote, "In a rush, unsure what to do, hunted everywhere, no longer safe." And that, if he goes on, he might end up next to him in a cell.
Authorities suspect Ibrahim al-Bakrawi is referring here to Salah Abdeslam, the suspected Paris attacker caught by police in Brussels days ago. Islamic State has claimed responsibility for the attacks in Brussels, as well as the violence in Paris last November. France's Prime Minister Manuel Valls says there needs to be more security at Europe's borders.
By attacking Brussels, the terrorists have attacked everything that Europe is all about, our values and what we represent. We are dealing with a terrorist organisation with its strengths, its resources and terrorist cells, recruiting at the heart of our society. A war has been waged against us, and we must be totally determined in fighting this scourge.
They report from the ABC. Michael Terry has tweeted in to say hardly any traffic on the Northern Motorway or the inner city, whizzing along, bloody marvellous, says Michael. He put the extra A's in there. Let's go to Carla Penman, who's standing on the Hopetown Bridge, which is a lovely kind of view. Oh, look, Carla, I can't believe how smoothly the traffic... In fact, there isn't any traffic beneath you, is there?
It might not look like there's much traffic behind me at the moment, but according to the Transport Agency website, there's the motorways heading west, south and north, leading up to the Harbour Bridge at the moment. They're actually in parts in a standstill. So here I think it's about to sort of keep building, particularly as people get off work. But one would assume that perhaps some did leave a little earlier after work to try and avoid this rather expected chaos ahead of the Easter weekend starting.
Well, it looks like someone's stolen all the cars. It's so quiet out there. Carla, what about the rest of the country? Have you had any reports from Wellington and Christchurch?
We haven't had many reports down that way, no. The Transport Agency has just said to obviously be very aware of the peak times to be travelling, to also be aware of the weather, as particularly at this time of year it's still warm and it's quite dry, so it might mean that more people want to head away and go to those sort of hotspot areas. But in particular, I think looking sort of unfortunately up this way, not so much down to Wellington or Christchurch, or the South Island rather, the eastern, the Bay of Plenty, the Coromandel in particular, and also those heading up north of Auckland. That's the areas which seem to be of the most concern for people travelling and getting away. The Transport Agency says more than 20,000 vehicles are expected to be on the road this weekend, on top of what's normally on the road anyway. And heading out to the Coromandel, for example, is expected to be triple the number of people heading out that way. So I think it's kind of a bit of a guessing game as to how bad it's going to be, but people are being told just to hunker down, maybe just have a little more patience than normal, and expect some long delays.
Thanks, Carla Penman. We appreciate it. Carla Penman from atop the Hopetown Bridge, where Auckland looked incredibly quiet beneath her. Australia's Transport Minister Darren Chester has revealed this afternoon that a piece of plane wreckage found on the coast of Mozambique last month is almost certainly from MH370. The horizontal stabiliser skin, part of an aircraft's tail, was found by a US lawyer and blogger. Blaine Allen Gibson has funded his own year-long search for the missing airliner, which vanished shortly after taking off from Kuala Lumpur with 239 people on board, including 2 New Zealanders, 2 years ago. I asked him why he was doing it.
I have always loved to travel and go to new countries, and I have always loved to solve mysteries. I went to Tunguska in Siberia to try to learn what that meteor or whatever it was that struck the Earth over 100 years ago. I volunteered for some archaeological expeditions in Belize and Guatemala to learn what happened to the Maya. And I went looking myself for the lost Ark of the Covenant in Ethiopia. But this is a little different because those are great mysteries that need solving, but this is one that has a very important human element. And I am inspired by the desire to find and give some answers to the families of all those on board Malaysian 370. Just imagine, this is 239 people's loved ones who have not heard from their loved ones for over 2 years, and they have absolutely no idea what happened to them. I cannot imagine how that would feel. I have met and gotten to know some of these family members over the last year and feel very deeply for them and want to help give them some answers. And that is an extra, very strong inspiration to my going out and trying to solve this mystery.
Blaine, I'm staggered by the fact that you found the wreckage in Mozambique. And I'm staggered by the fact that you were even looking in Mozambique, because that is right across the Indian Ocean from Perth, almost due west. The plane, as we know, was flying north. So not only were you looking for a needle in a haystack, you were looking for a needle in a haystack completely in a different direction from where the plane was meant to have gone. Why were you there? Why did you know?
Well, I didn't know. And you see the one time that I was looking on a beach and found something, but you don't see the number of times that I was looking on beaches all over the Gulf of Thailand, Bay of Bengal, Andaman Sea, and Indian Ocean and found nothing. It's almost like winning the lottery. You see the one time that the person wins it, but not all the tickets that they bought before.
How many tickets have you bought? How many miles of beach have you walked?
I don't know, really. I haven't added them all up. I know that I walked on the island of Rodriguez, which is part of Mauritius. I walked about 30 kilometers of beach there and found nothing. I also combed the beaches in the Andaman Sea in Myanmar and in Thailand and in south of Cambodia and in La Réunion and in Australia.
One final question, and we really appreciate your time. Do you have a theory now? You have thought about it so much, you have travelled so far, you have walked coastlines, you have gone around the Indian Ocean. Do you have a theory of where this plane went down?
I tell you that I try to stay away from having a theory because I think that we need new evidence. However, I can say this based on the new evidence that I found, if it is confirmed to be from 370, if the piece that Liam Lauder found is confirmed to be from there, we do have new clues, and one would be that the plane did not crash in the Gulf of Thailand, did not crash in the Bay of Bengal, did not crash too far south in the southern Indian Ocean, meaning south of 40. And I'd also say this, and this is very important. Now, I am not an air crash investigator. I am not an aviation technician. But I can tell you this much. I saw this no-step panel that I named no-step, and it was separated in one place along the seam, and that's where the little high lock pin or bolt was let in. But it was torn right through the composite material and aluminum honeycomb into a triangle. Now, for something to rip through the two composite pieces and the aluminum honeycomb inside, that's evidence of a forceful, high-speed impact.
Blaine Allen Gibson just saying he believes there was an explosion. He thinks the evidence he's seen so far suggests really serious destruction rather than the plane being flown into the ocean somewhere. Right. Returning to the flag referendum now, and results are less than 3 hours away despite polls showing majority support for keeping the existing flag. Those campaigning for change are still hopeful that the Carl Lockwood silver fern flag will triumph tonight. A campaign group, Change the New Zealand Flag, is hosting a party at a central Auckland restaurant, and our reporter Mohammed Hassan is there. Oh, I was just listening. There's not many people there, Mohammed. There seems to be very little atmosphere. How many people there, young Mohammed?
Hi, John. At this stage, there's probably around a handful of people, less than 6 people at this.
Less than 6 people. There, we lost Mohammed. He certainly wasn't overwhelmed by the excitement of the occasion. He just disappeared. We will actually try and call him back. So, a campaign group, Change New Zealand Flag, hosting a party tonight at a central Auckland restaurant. 6 people there. We will try and get back to Mohammed Hassan. The Australian surf legend Bob McTavish is the star attraction at the Easter Masters Surfing Championship in Taranaki this weekend. The New Plymouth Surf Riders Club is celebrating the competition's 25th anniversary, and at 71, McTavish will take part in events around the championships and may even compete. Our Taranaki reporter Robin Martin has more.
Bob McTavish designed the V-bottom surfboard and was a key figure in the 1967 shortboard revolution, which is credited as being the forerunner to the high-performance boards of today. He says he got his inspiration from watching a mate kneeboarding.
But my friend George Greeno came from California every winter, and he was riding a kneeboard, a little 4'8" kneeboard, and his manoeuvring was so phenomenal and so opposite to longboarding that I said to myself, I've got to do that standing up.
During the next year, McTavish and his fellow conspirators chopped down boards from more than 9 feet long to the 6-foot board that is standard today. He says he always hoped the boards would one day be capable of manoeuvres undreamed of in his youth.
We had lots of fantasies about where we could take these boards, how deep we could take off, and the sort of takeoffs you see Slater doing the pipe now with like one paddle and pulls the board out from under him and stands up in the barrel. We visualised that back then. It was a fantasy to us, and it's taken 40 years, but it's come true.
A founding member of the Surf Riders Club, Wayne Arthur, also known as Arch, says while McTavish is a drawcard, the Masters is mostly an opportunity for surfers of a certain vintage to hang out.
I guess it's just the old guys getting back together without the a certain degree of competitiveness, but more the camaraderie and, the telling of lies and tales, and the older they are, the better they were, sort of thing. And it's just good mates.
Arthur says 130 surfers, both male and female, will compete in 17 divisions, starting with grommets, aged 30 to 34, up to immortals, aged over 75. And this year, stand-up paddleboards, or SUPs, are included for the first time.
That's sort of crossing over to the dark side for a lot of people, the stand-up paddleboard, but the older the guys get, the more injuries come to play, and so stand-up paddling is a good way of keeping wet, keeping in the water and still surfing. At 74 years old, Alan Pidwell will be one of the oldest participants.
Yeah, it'll be my last year on the surf gods. I hope to be immortal next year. To get there, you've just got to be growing old, not particularly gracefully, because as Arch said, it's all about having fun and being surfing with your mates.
Pidwell says he hasn't had any thoughts of hanging up his wetsuit just yet.
Well, it gets harder every year, but I still get a buzz when you're driving down the roads like to Waiwakaio and you see it pumping. Ooh, yeah, as our motto is, only a master knows the feeling. It's being stoked.
It's a feeling Bob McTavish knows all too well.
All I know is surfing, and it's not even competitive surfing. It's just how surfboards work and who's doing what and how well they're doing it. I'm totally intrigued by it, and will be till the day I drop. Every day is a fresh day, and I'm stoked to be vertical and doing something, and doing something to do with surfing.
The Masters got off to a rocky start today when a paddleboard competitor collapsed and required CPR. He was revived and in a critical condition at Taranaki Base Hospital this afternoon. In New Plymouth, for Checkpoint, Robin Martin.
Thanks, Robin. Lovely feedback coming in on traffic. Our favourite so far is Pauline, who was listening to us in Mosgiel and says there are no traffic issues at all. Oh, we're envious, Pauline, because the feedback from Auckland is actually, if you leave the city, it's hideous. 3.25 hours from Takapuna to Pukekohe. Livable? Yeah, right. John, the previous texter from Kapiti was not being sarcastic. I left Wellington Airport at spot on 4 and have arrived at Paraparaumu Beach at 5:55. Best run up the coast since mid-January, because that's 2 hours. Free-flowing until Raumati Straits, fantastic. Have a great Easter. Ashburton, bumper to bumper. I've just been travelling from Warkworth to Penrose in 60 minutes. Gosh, that's not bad. Dream run on Northern Motorway and Harbour Bridge, only heavy from Green Lane, but traffic north, very heavy, crawling from Puhoi. For people who don't know Auckland, that's the people who are heading north for the long weekend. It's 6 o'clock. You are listening to Checkpoint. Lovely to have your company as we end the week, the last half hour of the week. We're going to go back to Mohammed, who was at the party being held by the people who are hoping the flag will change tonight. There's 6 of them there, so we'll go back and he will describe the atmosphere and what they are predicting also coming up. We're going to go to Conan again, live down at Franz Joseph. He's going to describe the aftermath of the flooding, and we're going to look at sport. We're going to celebrate a very wonderful netballer who's standing down and preview the 2 big cricket matches of the T20 over the weekend. All of that coming up in the next 30 minutes. Plus, we're going to Myanmar because that's the kind of program we are. But here's Katrina Batten with RNZ News.
Ngā mihi nui, good evening. A police inspector says she's satisfied officers involved in the shooting of a man in Whanganui today acted appropriately. They say the man led 2 officers on a foot chase before pointing a gun at them, was shot in the head and the leg by officers. They say during the chase, the 49-year-old man threatened a woman with a handgun. He's in a stable condition in hospital. Acting District Commander Inspector Tania Kura says a police investigation will continue over the weekend.
From the information available to me at this time, I'm satisfied this incident was managed professionally and appropriately by the staff involved. I appreciate there'll be many questions about this morning, and our investigators will be working diligently and professionally to establish exactly what happened.
Inspector Tania Kura. The Independent Police Conduct Authority is also investigating. Work is continuing to plug a gap in the Waiho River's stop banks after it burst its banks last night and began running through a hotel. The Franz Joseph Hotel on the west coast has been evacuated and a state of emergency declared. Conan Young is at Franz Joseph.
Diggers are trying to reroute the river away from the Mueller Scenic Hotel with the help of large rocks. They have a massive job ahead of them as the river is running high and fast and has deposited large amounts of debris and silt around the hotel. However, the severe weather and the torrential downpours have now eased, and the Waiho is no longer posing a threat to other accommodation providers. Hotel guests evacuated last night have been allowed back to collect their belongings today, and those spoken to by RNZ News say there was no damage to their things. In Franz Joseph, Conan Young.
New Zealanders will know shortly if they have a new flag. Voting for the second flag referendum will close in an hour, with preliminary results expected not long after that. Here's our political reporter May Heron.
Voters had to choose between the current flag and the blue and black flag with a silver fern designed by Carl Lockwood. It's expected more than 2 million people will have voted. The Prime Minister, John Campbell, is hopeful they've voted for change, but says regardless, the referendum has been successful in getting people to talk about how New Zealand represents itself. The referendum officially closes at 7 tonight, with preliminary results out about 8:30. From Parliament, May Heron.
A recycling company ordered to pay more than $150,000 over the death of a contractor a year ago says it has learned its lesson from the tragedy. Junior Hunt, who was 20, died after he was trapped in the hydraulic lifting hoist of an Enviro Waste truck. The company was sentenced in the Wellington District Court yesterday after admitting charges under the Health and Safety in Employment Act. Its chief executive, Gary Saunders, says staff remain deeply saddened by Mr Hunt's death and their thoughts are with his family. He says following rigorous investigations, Enviro Waste has made operational improvements and modified its truck designs. He says the tragedy is an enduring reminder about the critical importance of health and safety on the job. American and Belgian intelligence sources are certain that Najim Lashraoui is dead. He is the third man in the image from the closed-circuit television footage at the Brussels airport. That's where 2 of the 3 bombs went off, leaving more than 30 dead and hundreds injured in the European capital. DNA evidence indicates he built the bombs used in the Paris attacks and in Brussels. Our correspondent Ollie Barrett reports from Brussels.
It does appear now, it is being reported by multiple sources, that one of the men pictured in that famous CCTV picture at the airport, Najim Lashraoui, named by much of the Belgian media as the key missing suspect, the Paris bomb maker. It does appear now, we are being told by multiple sources, that he was killed in that airport suicide bombing.
Ollie Barrett in Brussels. The former New Zealand soldier who had been held without charge in a maximum security prison in Perth since early November has arrived back in New Zealand. Ko Hapu was detained after his visa was revoked under tough new Australian immigration laws. Mr Hapu had no criminal history and had not been charged with anything, but his membership of the Rebels Motorcycle Club saw his Australian visa revoked on character grounds. Calls for the 34-year-old to be released came from New Zealand politicians and former colleagues in the New Zealand Army. Mr Hapu served in Afghanistan and was part of a security detail for Prime Minister John Key. He had been fighting deportation, but after 4.5 months in prison and with no prospect of release, he agreed to return to New Zealand. In sport, the Central Pulse netball coach Tanya Dern says Irene van Dijk would be on anyone's list, but they haven't discussed her yet as a possible replacement for the retiring Silver Ferns shooter Jodie Brown. Brown suffered a career-ending knee injury at a pre-season tournament in Sydney last weekend. The new Trans-Tasman competition starts next week and Derns is looking for a replacement. She says Van Dijk may not be considered as she has full-time work with Netball Central. Meanwhile, Brown says she's bitterly disappointed to have been forced to end her career early, especially as she felt the Pulse were coming together well this year.
It kind of adds to the frustration and disappointment really, because we were really starting to show really good form in Sydney. We'd had a couple of pre-season games against Magic and Mystics, which we developed in each of those games, but Sydney we just seemed to have taken a step up.
Jodie Brown. The Wellington Phoenix have signed the Melbourne Victory playmaker Guy Finkler on a 2-year contract. World Cup hero Stephen Donald is set to play his first Super Rugby game for the Chief in 5 years after being named on the bench for their game against the Western Force in Hamilton on Saturday night. And it's a holy day in India, so there are no matches at the World T20 cricket tonight. That's the news.
While not even the horror of war could silence the nightingale's song.
If you've seen something beautiful amongst the ugly flotsam and jetsam of life, take a photo and email it to nights@radionz.co.nz, and then the whole nation can see it. Pretty Ugly, an Easter celebration, weeknights after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Wellington, including the Central High Country and Coromandel Peninsula. Remaining areas of rain with heavy falls and possible thunderstorms, easing to isolated showers from the west this afternoon and evening. Bay of Plenty, rain with heavy falls and thunderstorms easing tomorrow morning. Gisborne to Wairarapa, periods of rain or showers with some heavy falls. Marlborough and Nelson fine, apart from a few showers this evening and overnight. Buller and Westland, cloudy periods and isolated showers. showers. Fiordland becoming confined by evening. Canterbury to Southland, scattered showers, some possibly heavy with hail in Canterbury during the afternoon, clearing from Southland and Otago by evening and from Canterbury overnight. The Chatham Islands, rain developing overnight, possibly heavy tomorrow. It is 6:08.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina.
Thank you, John.
We're going to stay with weather. The wild west coast has a reputation for wet weather, but last night's torrential rain, which led to the evacuation of 186 people in the west coast town of Franz Josef, was, well, largely unexpected. Just after 11 o'clock last night, the Waiho River breached its banks, submerging cars and resulting in a new water channel. Basically, the river just diverted itself to run metres deep through Scenic's Heartland Hotel. Photographer Jacob Deswat from Sydney had just driven from Wanaka to Franz Josef when the weather turned bad.
Honestly, I woke up during the course of the night a couple of times, and I'm not used to rain like this, and I stuck my head outside, and I was like wondering whether or not, how high the water was. We're on the other side of the Waiho River, but it sounded like a fire hose on the roof. It was phenomenal.
And so at what stage did you start taking photos?
When we got up this morning, we got online quickly, and we realised that we're in a state of emergency. And so as we went into town, I had the camera with me, and we were lucky that emergency services are sort of tidied up a bit. So we're able to stop and get out and take some pics.
Your partner's Kiwi, right?
Yeah, she's from Gore, and she was telling me on the drive up from Wanaka yesterday that it rains like this all the time on the West Coast.
but possibly not quite that severe.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Did you ever seriously worry about some kind of flash flood? Was it that bad?
Look, for a river of that size to break its banks, and it is a bit concerning, I suppose. But look, the emergency services here had it all under control. They were really calm and collected. And we spoke to a few locals, and they were like, it seemed like a 1 in 150 storm, and some of the people that were staying at the Scenic Hotel were like, it was all good. It was, they moved us up the road to the sister hotel, and so by all means it all went smoothly, I guess.
How torrential was the rain, Jacob?
Honestly, I looked outside, and our car's parked 3 feet from the cottage we're staying in, and I couldn't really see the car. And like I said, it sounded like a fire hose on the roof a few times through the night. I'm a heavy sleeper at the best of times, and it woke me and had me thinking, what's going on outside? This is crazy.
Have you ever seen rain like it? Ever come across rain like it?
Never. Not in my life. I've been, a few places, and I've never, ever heard or seen rain like that.
Extraordinary pictures that Jacob sent in to us. Our reporter Conan Young has been in Franz Josef, and I asked Conan what he's seen.
John, look, really amazing scenes, really. I'm at the main entrance to the Scenic Mueller Hotel. It used to be on the banks of the Waiho River in Franz Josef. It is now literally in the Waiho River. The Waiho River is flowing through this hotel. I'm looking at waters, flood waters, but also a direct current. Look down the main driveway, the main entrance into this hotel, and the river seems to have snaked its way around into a lot of the hotel. I'm not sure how far it has made it inside a lot of these rooms, but it's deposited just incredible amounts of debris. Rock, silt. I'm standing in mud, very reminiscent sort of the liquefaction that we've seen in Christchurch after the earthquakes. It's all been deposited here by the river. I went up and actually had a look at the river just before. It is the main body of the river is an absolute torrent. It's incredible. It's moving very quickly. It looks very grumpy, for want of another word, and it really does look quite threatening. So I can't imagine what it would have been like last night when this hotel was evacuated.
Conan, people left in a hurry, and it's just as well they did from what we hear. Have people been able to get back in and retrieve what was left behind during the evacuation?
They have, yeah. I talked to some evacuees just before. They'd just this afternoon been allowed back to retrieve some of their belongings. They said, look, their belongings were actually fine. So obviously this water hasn't made its way into a lot of these rooms. And look, they said, things were handled really well. It was 10 o'clock last night when they were evacuated. And so it sounds like that was all handled in a really orderly fashion. I guess, perhaps some questions have to be asked about the location of this hotel right next to the Waiho River. I was speaking to some road workers who are just at the moment clearing some silt and rock from the road, which was also caught up in the flooding where the river actually took off down at one stage. And they said, look, that they'd always felt there was a risk of the Waiho doing just this, of actually bursting its banks and coming through this very hotel. We're on the west coast here, but we're very close to the mountains. And so, when that rain hits, a lot of rain hit last night, more than 200 mils in a very short space of time. And so that river all of a sudden just, grew rapidly and proved a real threat to this hotel.
Our reporter Conan Young speaking from Franz Josef. It's 14 minutes past 6. Lots of traffic texts coming up. We'll get to those in a couple of minutes. But first, let's return to Mohammed Hassan, who was at the Change the New Zealand Flag party being hosted for people who support changing the flag. Mohammed, can you hear me all right?
Yes, John, I can hear you all right. You can hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear. So who's there? How many people there?
Fantastic. Well, hey, John, I'm here at the Oak Room, at Victoria Park in central Auckland. There's round about maybe 5 or 6 people here at the moment, which is quite shy of the 50 they have been expecting. But they are saying that they're optimistic, well, they're cautiously optimistic, that a lot more people will turn out, and they'll also be getting a positive result, the result that they want by the end of the night.
For people not watching, Mohammed is standing in front of 2 Carl Lockwood silver fern flags. These people are very much for change. What's their vibe? The polls have been suggesting it's going to go against them. What do they think, Mohammed?
Well, what they've been telling me is that, yes, like everybody else, they have seen the polls. They are aware that the polls aren't in their favour. And what the polls are suggesting is that a lot of New Zealanders don't want a new flag. They don't want this particular flag, the Carl Lockwood design. But they're saying that they've ran a positive campaign. They've had a lot of people turn out, over 2 million, which is quite considerable. They think that a lot of people would have warmed up to the flag in the last 15 months that the process has been in place, and they're also hoping that by the end of the night, at the very least, they would have started a conversation about the national identity.
Yeah, which is what the Prime Minister was saying earlier today, suggesting that everyone's on message. Mohammed, who's there? Do you reckon anyone? Is Lewis Holden there? Do you recognise anyone?
Well, yes, the campaign chair, Lewis Holden, is here. I spoke to him earlier. He reiterated that he's cautiously optimistic. He's not too hopeful that there's going to be some sort of miraculous result by the end of the night. But there's still an hour before the polls close. They say they've reached out to a lot of people in New Zealand. A lot of people have responded positively. And if the flag change does happen, it'll be the first time the New Zealand flag has changed in 114 years.
Mohammed Hassan from the Change the New Zealand Flag party down at a central Auckland restaurant, not far from us here actually, where so far the bar tab will not have been too taxing on account of the fact that there are 6 people there, but you never know, it might pick up as the evening goes on. And also, ladies and gentlemen, obviously it's quality, not quantity. Right, in terms of the quantity, people are approaching us from around the country, but the Kapiti Coast situation seems egregious. 3 hours, 10 minutes to get from Otaki to Wellington. That's absurd. Hey, John, just rolled into Orkeri Falls. Traffic light, cafe open, employment opportunities high, property value reasonable. When are you coming for a visit? Your personal host, John. That's a lovely invitation, John. I'll see you soon. Driving from Wellington City to Palmerston North, we've been stuck in almost standstill traffic for 2 hours. I wonder if they were going up the coast. This is absurd. Someone else, Sarah, emailed and said the expressway roadworks, which is supposed to be only at night time, I had thought of adding huge delays every day. I travel from Plimmerton to Raumati South, and that can take over an hour and a half. Madness. Sarah, I reckon you could walk up the coast from Plimmerton to Raumati South in an hour and a half. That's ridiculous. We promise we're going to look into this because that really is bad news. Rotorua saying the transit ride home is 5 minutes. And Dave from Dunedin saying he had to wait for 3 light changes. Gridlock in Dunedin. Thank you all. It's lovely to hear from you. Former silver fern shooter Jodie Brown has been forced to retire from netball early after suffering a serious knee injury. Another one, Brown, who was Jodie Tehuna for much of her career, ruptured her knee ligaments during the Central Pulse's first match of the ANZ Championship pre-season tournament in Sydney last weekend. Brown told RNZ's Bridget Tunnicliffe that she knew straight away it was bad.
It brought back memories of 10 years ago when I did my other one, so I was like, this is the same feeling. So jumped to that conclusion straight away, obviously, and I was just hoping that the medical fairies might have done something else to me in between when I got home and having scans and stuff.
Did you contemplate for a second, making a comeback and just fighting through it?
Yeah, I have. I have thought about that since I've done the injury. And I have shown that I have done it before, obviously, when I ruptured my other ACL. So I knew it was doable, but I also knew how much hard work it is and what kind of level of fitness and mental, mental side of things that you need to get back to the elite level. And I think it's just probably a little bit of a step too far, given my age and where I'm at with my family and stuff like that.
It seems these days that for a netballer to go through her career without getting an ACL is almost a miracle. It seems like there's so much pressure you're putting on your body now as professional netballers.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the risk that you take when you do play netball and you do expose yourself to your body to all these different weird and wonderful ways that you decide to take the ball. But it is really freaky that how common they are now. And I was actually talking to Katrina Grant on the way over on the plane, and we were talking about Tegan Phillip, who has been ruled out of the Vixens with the ACL injury. And I actually said to Katrina, sadly, this won't be the last. I said there'll be a couple more this season, and that might have just jinxed me, actually.
So that's Jodie Brown talking to Bridget Tunnicliffe. Matt Chatterton, our sports reporter here in Auckland. What terrible luck.
Yes, to be joking about that with a teammate on the plane ride over to the pre-season tournament, and then for it to happen to you, that's, as you said, it jinxed her a little bit. Yeah.
She's been unlucky, hasn't she? Because Commonwealth Games she missed out on with a similar injury, right?
Yes, other leg happened to her. So she, as she mentioned, she knew what the sort of recovery time was and how much effort you have to put in, and made the decision that time was up.
A 13-year international career. What a remarkable woman.
Exactly. She started out when she was about 21 years old in 2003 and played 61 tests throughout her career for New Zealand, and played quite a pivotal role actually in the recent Constellation Cup. We drew that 2-2, but Australia won that on countback for the more goals they scored than us. But Jodie still played a big role in that tournament.
Right, talking about remarkable sportswomen, the White Ferns are playing Sunday morning, and they are playing the T20 World Cup. They are playing who, Matt?
South Africa.
Right, yeah, and what is South Africa like?
That's a good question. They beat Ireland just this morning for their first win of the competition. They've played 2 games, so
they've got
a bit of mixed form. Yeah, whereas we've won both of our games in the lead up to this match, and we just beat Australia the other day, so we're in good form.
Let's use a stronger word than beat. I think we smited Australia.
Whoa.
They smited Australia.
Whoa, I don't know we're allowed to use such big words.
Well,
like
we don't know. Well, but it was such a wonderful victory, wasn't it?
It was, yes. And I mean, Susie Bates, the captain, played incredibly well. Rachel Priest refound her form that sort of had been missing from her batting recently, but refound it as we saw. So, no, it was really good to see them put up a good performance against our Trans-Tasman neighbours.
Okay, so they would be favourites, I think, going into that game against South Africa.
You'd say that, yes.
Okay, and so with the Black Caps already through to the semi-finals, we are looking at a very realistic possibility that both our T20 teams are going to be through in the semis.
Yes, that is a very... I mean, I don't want to jinx it like Jodie did earlier, because, I mean, you know what I'm like with trying to pick something. But, the Black Caps are already through. We've got our game against Bangladesh on Saturday night at 10:30, so that'll be the final match. Bangladesh actually played this morning against India and blew the biggest opportunity to cause such an upset you would have ever seen in world history.
You just actually feel physically sick on their behalf.
They needed 2 runs off the last 3 balls and got 3 wickets. It's unbelievable how it happened. The Indians obviously bowled well to their field, but I think there's a real lesson learnt there for Bangladesh in that game, because the skills or not the skills, but the memories they'll have of that will live with them for a long time. I imagine.
I suspect that those boys who were falling at the end will wake up screaming at 3 a.m. for years to come.
And you could see the disappointment in their face as they walked off. Like, they were actually stopping and having to take a breath because they realised how bad they had mucked up and what an opportunity that was to beat the world number one team.
And had they beaten India, India would have lost 2 and would have been out of their own tournaments.
Yes, and now they've got to beat Australia. Oh! That's going to be the decider, because Australia and India are in our pool, obviously, and they're the sort of last 2 teams that really can decide who goes through. So that is a really exciting game. We always know what Australia and India are like on the field. They don't leave anything left out there. So it'll be really interesting to see who comes through that one. But yes, we have got the Black Caps Bangladesh game as well. Adam Milne said this morning that he is really they're going to keep the foot down on the pedal. They're not going to let up. Wait
a sec. This is a motor racing metaphor. Isn't
sorry.
It? So foot on the pedal. We're talking about cricket here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, right. I get so many different metaphors confused with so many sport. Yes. But no. So they don't expect to let up against Bangladesh. I mean, they saw what they did to India and how they almost chased that down. So they won't be they'll be expecting the unexpected, I imagine, against Bangladesh.
Okay. It's exciting, isn't it?
It's very exciting.
Wouldn't it be great if both teams made it, the White Ferns and the Black Caps have?
Yes, it would be. It would be a great sign for New Zealand cricket and, the sort of progress they've made over the last few years. Obviously, a year today, actually, when we won the semi-final of the South Africa-New Zealand semi-final in the Cricket World Cup last year. So a bit of a good omen. Yes, Grant Elliott, those scenes when he hit that 6 off Dale Steyn. Oh, good memories.
Thanks, Matt. Have a wonderful Easter.
Same to you.
Just coming up to 25 minutes past 6. The law in Myanmar has been described as a textbook for repression. The government there has recently changed, with the military regime that's governed the country since the 1960s now firmly in the minority in Parliament. And the democratic government of the National League for Democracy set up to take the reins from the beginning of April. But amongst the myriad of problems they will inherit is the vexed issue of political prisoners. Amnesty International has just released its latest look at what's happening inside Myanmar, and it's calling on the new government to act right now to release the political prisoners who remain behind bars and tear up the legislation that has put so many of them there. Amnesty's Myanmar researcher Laura Hay is in Yangon, from where she spoke to our reporter Alex Ashton.
Today, almost 200 prisoners of conscience are behind bars. So in releasing this report today, we want to firstly highlight this ongoing trend, but also we have a government coming in at the end of next week we hope will take concrete and quite swift measures to firstly release those individuals, but secondly to start to dismantle the repressive framework that allows them to be arrested and imprisoned in the first place.
How much of an overhaul, though, would it have to be for them to change some of those laws? Because it seems like it's pretty much through the entire legal system.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, Myanmar's legal code reads the textbook of repression. I mean, there are many laws that are used and continue to be used to arrest and imprison activists. So the reforms will have to go quite far. However, there are some specific laws that are used more frequently than others, and I think it would definitely be possible for the authorities to begin by targeting those particular laws that are used more often. For example, charges for protesting without permission or charges with incitement, which seem to just be stacked up against activists, leading to their sentences to become longer and longer.
Is Amnesty International hopeful that things actually will change?
I think it's too early to tell. I mean, we've definitely seen some significant changes over the last 5 years, but as I say, we've also seen an increase in repression, so old tactics can die hard. I think what we're saying is that we have hopes in the incoming administration, and we also really call on members of the international community, particularly governments like the government of New Zealand, to increase the pressure, keep it up on Myanmar to ensure that this reform process is genuine, that it succeeds, and that it puts human rights at its heart.
That was Amnesty International's researcher in Myanmar talking to Alex Ashton. Let's preview what's coming up on World Watch while we are out in the world. Elizabeth Brown on at 6:30, of course, piecing together the Belgian bombings, cancer rates soaring in China. This is fascinating. Obviously, dietary changes and a lot of smoking going on in China now. And what's killing Europe's most prolific tree. All of that coming up in 2.5 minutes. People on this program are very partial to animal stories, and we try and get one in as often as we possibly can. Here's one. 5 cheetah cubs whose mother died after birth at the Cincinnati Zoo are finding warmth with a companion dog who was serving as their nanny in the zoo nursery. The cub's mother died after failing to recover from the caesarean birth. We have some pictures now. They're very cute. Blakey, a 5-year-old a male Australian shepherd, has stepped in to provide a warm, furry body the cubs can snuggle with and climb upon for exercise. Good dog. Zoo workers say they're bottle feeding the cubs every 3 hours and hope Blakely can teach them important behavioural skills. And this is not Blakely's first assignment at the zoo. He helped a baby goat antelope to learn to manoeuvre over rocks and taught another cheetah the difference between a friendly nibble and a bite. What a fine dog. Give him a bone. Very good boy. Right, we're going to end tonight with some feedback. John, the traffic in Pack and Save Lower Hutt's underground car park is diabolical, but it's nothing compared to the queue for self-service checkouts. I object to self-service checkouts. The supermarket companies are making enough money and they should have people to serve you, and you queue up there and it's just no good at all. And John, this one, Graham has called me on this. Hi John, you're very clearly now out of touch with Wellington traffic conditions. Yes, I am, and I'm ashamed to say that as a Wellingtonian. 2 weeks back, I left Te Aro at 3:30 p.m. Transit signs at Porirua predicted 2 hours 9 minutes to Waikanai. That should be an hour from Porirua max. I reached Raumati South at 6:20. Cheers, Graham. Wellington, we have let you down. And we are remiss, and we unreservedly apologise. And next week we will look at this because this is diabolical heading up and down the Kapiti coast. And in fact, if you want us to accompany you on a ride home, text us 2101 and we will accompany you on a ride home one evening from work. Denise, our excellent producer, will accompany you home and we will chronicle your abysmal journey along what is really the only route out of Wellington unless you go over the Haywoods. But even then, you've still got to travel up the Kapiti coast. Diabolical. Have a wonderful Easter weekend. Do drive carefully. Paternalistic, I know, but we mean it, and we hope to see you at 5 o'clock on Tuesday.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A police inspector says she's satisfied officers involved in the injury shooting of a man in Whanganui acted appropriately. Westland Civil Defence says lives could have been lost when a flood went through a hotel near Franz Joseph if it wasn't for the actions of 2 locals monitoring the river. A former New Zealand soldier held without charge in a maximum security prison in Perth under Australia's tough immigration laws says he was assaulted by guards. And preliminary results from the second flag referendum should start coming through in an hour. Our next news and weather at 7.
Welcome to World Watch PM. I'm Elizabeth Brown. Tonight, piecing together the Belgian bombings, cancer rates soar in China, and the